Right. Good morning, everyone. Last lecture, I stopped here. Right. I stopped here, but I'll go back a few slides. Right. Right. I'll go back to this slide. I just want to emphasize a few points regarding this particular section. Okay. Now, supervision. Right. Right. Responsibilities of supervisors. Right. So this is the key concept. Right. Reasonable supervision. Right. So in your cases, you will have to establish what is reasonable supervision. Right. So it's on a case by case basis. All right. So if reasonable, if the protagonist, right, has established reasonable supervision, right, that means in the sense that reasonable procedures and steps are taken, right, to institute an effective compliance program. Okay. But but there may be some failure, right, in the detection of violation. Okay. So this standard may not be violated, right? May not be violated. So, in other words, it's a question of judgment as to what is reasonable supervision, right? But then again, the protagonist, right, must also take steps, right, to ensure that these shortcomings, if the compliance program fail in some instances to detect violation. Okay, this means that the compliance procedures are inadequate. So that means he must also take steps to rectify the defects. All right. So this is a very important. These are very important points here. Right. So these are the features of an adequate compliance system. Right. These 4 points. Right. And adequate, legally should meet what benchmark, right? So these are the benchmark, as to what is adequate supervision, right? These are the benchmark. All right. But the this benchmark, right, I mean, you must always monitor them and enforce them. Okay. And another key point must be in place prior to occurrence of any violation, right? So that is why this point is important, right? Because cannot detect all errors, right? So no system is foolproof, right? Cannot be all encompassing, right? But the key standard should be appropriate. That means reasonable supervision, right? Should be appropriate and anticipative, right? Of potential misconduct. Okay, potential misconduct. Okay, here potential misconduct, that means is intentional misconduct, right? More intentional, right? So inadequate, must be highlighted, and then the so-called supervisor, right, should refuse, right, in writing, acceptance of supervisory responsibility if he or she feels that the compliance system is absent or inadequate. But inadequate, is a question of degree, so this is open for debate as to what is inadequate. So, it's a question of judgment here. right? And if there's occurrence of violation, right, the protagonist must promptly initiate investigation, right, to ascertain the extent of the wrongdoing, right? You must not rely on the accused statements, right? And so just reporting and warning not enough, and you must curtail and monitor, your subordinates' activities, right, to make sure that the violations will not occur again, right? So these are the few key points you must take note. Right, so I've stopped here, right? I've actually stopped here. Okay, now, I mean, as to how it is supervised, right? Right, so it's best to have it written down, right? Tailored for the company and very accessible to everybody. So it must be a manual, right? And make sure everybody can understand it, the procedures, right? And it's best to have a designated uh, compliance officer to oversee this system. And this point here, right? You probably need to describe the hierarchy of supervision, right? And assign duties among supervisors. So you have, probably sub supervisors, sub supervisors. All right. So now, uh, this is just an example, right? It's not in your notes, but you can get this anywhere, right? This is an example of a hierarchy of supervision and assignment of duties among supervisors. All right. So for instance, right, this the person in charge here, right? The person in charge here, he or she would have so-called ministerial responsibility over, over this, over the whole thing, right? Over the whole company, right? This is what they call ministerial responsibility. Okay. Now, for instance, right, uh, the chief of marketing, right? The chief of marketing could be in charge of, say, uh, in here, right? It's not just one person. It could be probably 10%, right? Okay, so you probably have a front office manager, right? And then so this front office will be in charge of, you know, probably, right, three supervisors, three sub supervisors. So here probably you have three, one supervisor for fund management, one supervisor for analysts, and one supervisor for trading, right? So this is more or less in the investment profession. This is how the setup looks like, right? So this is just an example, right, of hierarchy of supervision and assignment of duties among supervisors. So all these people are supervisors, right? They are also supervisors, or sub supervisors, right? And these people here in green, right? Uh, Even this one, and this one, and this, and this, and this. Probably those that are marked in green, right, don't have any supervisory duties. All right, so those are marked in red, right? Okay, and if you have somebody below you, some subordinates below you, then you are a supervisor, right? So you have supervisory responsibilities. All right, is that clear? Right. So obviously, I mean, these are just recommended, right, procedures for compliance, right? Okay, so basically, you would have a system of checks and balances, right? Uh, you know what are checks and balances, right? Somebody to do the checking and balance up, to make sure that there's objectivity, right? Outline the scope of procedures and outline the procedures to document monitoring and testing of compliance procedures, right? These are just suggestions. Outline what is permissible conduct, and delineate. That means define procedures for reporting violations and sanctions. right? So there are certain procedures to follow, right? Delineate. Okay, now we'll do some case studies. Right, Jane, right, Senior Vice President and Head of Research Department of HMV, right, is a regional brokerage firm, right, has decided to change, right, her recommendation for timber products from buy to sell, all right. Okay, so in line with the procedure, she orally advises certain of other HMV executive, right? So these are the subordinates of a proposed action before the report is prepared for publication, right? So Jane has supervisory responsibilities, okay, as a result of his conversation with Maddow, right? So this guy, Dieter Fremden, one of the executive of HMV accountable to Maddow, right? So he is accountable to Maddow. That means he is a subordinate, right? Immediately sells, right? So buy to sell, so he sells, right? Timber stock from his own account and from certain discretionary client accounts. In addition, other personnel inform certain institutional customers of the change recommendation, right, before it is printed and disseminated to all HMV customers who have received previous timber reports. Right, so here's a question of reasonable supervision again, right? Reasonable supervision. All right, did Jane conduct reasonable supervision? Right here, I mean, basically she just orally advises, right? Okay, probably this is not the right way to do things, right? And then Dieter Fremden, right, was talking to Jane Maddow, right? So this guy Dieter sells, did something, right? Okay. Now not only is on the own account, but from certain discretionary client account, right? So he took the action to change the recommendation, right? So I mean, the news just spread, so there's no proper control of the information. So in addition, right, other personnel inform certain, this part here of the change recommendation before it is printed, right, and disseminate, before printed and disseminated. So there's no proper procedure, right? Here, there's no proper procedure to review any changes in recommendation, right? So I will think that the procedures here are inadequate, right? So there's an inadequate supervision, right? So it's not reasonable supervision. All right. So Jane, right? I mean, did she supervise the research activities properly? I don't think so, right? So I think she's violated 4C, right? She was violated by failing to reasonably, right? So reasonable supervision, adequate supervision. Is it reasonable and adequate? Right? I don't think so, because she did not prevent or establish reasonable procedures designed to prevent dissemination, right, of the change recommendation, right? And then, right, if you look at the lecture notes, right, she must ensure that the firm has the procedures for reviewing and recording any trading, right? This part here. So, right, so if there's adequate procedures, the adequate procedures would have done all this, right? So you can see the flow. All right, so on this basis, there's no reasonable supervision, so she has violated 4C. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Dion Miller is the research director for Jamestown Investment, right? So this case, again, is about supervising research activities. Okay, the portfolio managers have become critical of Miller and his staff because the Jamestown portfolios do not include any stock that has been the subject of a merger or tender offer, right? So a little suspicious, right? This part here. Georgia Jin, a member of Miller's staff, right, tells Miller that she has been studying a local company, Excelsior Incorporation, and recommends its purchase. All right. Jin adds that the company has been widely rumored to be the subject of a merger study by a well-known conglomerate, and discussions between them are underway. Okay. At Miller's request, Jin prepares a memo recommending the stock. Okay. Miller passes along Jin's memo to the portfolio managers prior to leaving for vacation, noting that he has not reviewed the memo. Okay. So, okay, these are signs of improper procedures. So as a result of the memo, the portfolio managers buy the stock immediately. So some action was taken. The day Miller returns to office, Miller learns that Jin's only sources for the report were her brother, who is an acquisition analyst with Amy Industries and a well-known conglomerate, and that the merger discussions were planned, right, but not held, right? So there's no proper dissemination of the memo, right? To make sure that Jin, right, this lady, uh, you know, I mean, has some basis. So there's 2 points here, which Dion failed to do, right? She had failed to exercise reasonable supervision of Jin, right? So if you don't understand all this, I mean, basically, this is, Dion has failed to exercise reasonable supervision of Jin, right? When he gave the memo to the Jin, right? And so Dion has failed to check whether Jin, right, has a reasonable basis for her recommendation, and whether, right, Jin was relying on material non-public information. All right. All right, because this, obviously, the information here, the merger or tender offer, is material information. And here, we can tell that the information was disseminated before it was made public, right? So Jin conducted basically 2 violations, and Dion has failed to supervise Jin, in his memo. All right, because Dion is giving Jin his instructions through the memo. All right. So has he violated? Right. Yes. Right. So these are the key points, right? Not exercising reasonable supervision when he disseminated, when he tried to supervise using this memo, right, without checking, right, that Jin, one, had a reasonable and adequate basis, right, and Jin did not use material public information, right? 2 violations here. All right. Right. Another case. David Edwards, right, a trainee trader at Wheeler & Co., right? This is a major national brokerage firm, right? Assists a customer in paying for the securities of Highland Corporation by using anticipated profits, right, from the immediate sale of the same securities. I mean, this is a bit dubious, right? Anticipated profits, right? Despite the fact that Highland is not on Wheeler's recommended list, right, a large volume of his stock is traded through Wheeler in this manner. Roberta Ann Mason, right, is a Wheeler vice president responsible for supervising compliance with the securities law right, in the trading department. Okay, part of a compensation from Wheeler is based on commission revenues from the trading department. And although she noticed the increased trading activity, she does nothing to investigate or halt it. All right, she does nothing to investigate. All right, so right, so the question here is whether Roberta Ann Mason, right, now she's a supervisor, right? David Edwards is only a trainee trader, right, an intern. Right, so as vice president, she's responsible for supervising compliance, with all this. Right, so probably she had vested interest, right? So part of her compensation from Wheeler, right, is based on commission revenues from the trading department. Right, so now, right, commission revenues, right? So here, right, although she noticed the increased trading activity, she does nothing to increase. You see, this increased trading activity could be very dubious. Right, so you see, now if she assists the customer in paying for the securities, so the customer don't pay first, right? I mean, they're just using the anticipated profit from the immediate sale of the same security, right? Anticipated profits. That means you're using borrowed money, right? So in this instance, right, I mean, the customer won't mind. So, I mean, this activity would generate the increase, this would generate the increased trading. All right. All right, because the customer won't mind. So there's increased trading activity, right? And obviously, she doesn't mind this increased trading activity because this would increase her commission revenue, right? So she's happy. Roberta and Mason will close one eye. She's happy. So obviously, she will do nothing to investigate or halt it. But then again, right, Roberta and Mason, right, she is supposed to be a supervisor. She has supervisory responsibilities, right? So she has a duty, right, to review and investigate all these purchase orders, right? All these purchase orders, right, using anticipated profit. So it's very suspicious, right? So she had failed to supervise David Edwards properly, right? So in this case, right, it is a conflict of interest because Roberta and Mason, right, she wants to have all these revenues, right? This commission revenue. She's interested in all this. That's why she does nothing to investigate it. Okay, but she has a supervisory responsibility to Edward. Okay, and basically she has failed to, you know, to stop this, right? To stop this part here, right? Using anticipated profits, to make the sale. All right. I hope my explanation is clear. Right. So again, this is about supervising trading activities, right? Has she violated? Yes. All right. Right. So again, right. I mean, students, right? I pay attention. These are comments, right? Not the answer, to the question because the case didn't ask you any question. So we just show you a case, and these are the comments regarding the case, right? So don't present your answer in your second midterm or final exam like that. Don't ask a question like that, right? All right. So do it the way that we do it in the first midterm, the review, right? I've shown you how to answer the question, right? So basically, Mason has failed, to adequately review and investigate, right? These purchase orders, right? Executed by the trainee Edwards, right? Okay. Investigate all these purchase orders and also fail to supervise the trainee's activities. right? So that's why she has violated 4C. Right. So basically, again, this part, right? She's quite selfish, right? I mean, she has her own self-interest, right? So that's a conflict here. She has her own self-interest, right? And she has some supervisory responsibility. So these two are in conflict, right? Potential conflict between these two. Right. Any question? Any question? Right. So right. So the question in 4.2, only 3 students have submitted the answers. Right. So you look at this 4.2, right? Right. Again, okay. I'll just talk about this first. Right. Standard 4C, right? Responsibilities of supervisors, right? This case, right? Now, Olsen, hang on for a sec. Right. So Olsen, right? He's the president and CEO. All right. So basically, he has, as president and CEO, right? He has a so-called ministerial responsibility, right? So basically, he has overall accountability for the conduct of his firm. His firm is RCS, right? So that means Olsen, right, is ultimately responsible for compliance with the applicable legal requirements, right? Okay. Okay, which also entails fulfilling his firm's ethical duties to the client, right? So he is someone who is bearing ministerial responsibility for RCS. So the question here is about delegation, right? All right. So here, this case is about charging the client. So probably his staff, right, made some honest mistake, right? So here, all right, the first point is about is that he should have delegated he, I mean, here the action here, right, is basically about charging the advisory fees. Okay, right. Despite you have written procedures, and all these written policies and procedures, right? How it was done, blah blah blah, right? And then it was in compliance, you know. Okay, so it was agreed upon, right? But here, this part here, right, in certain circumstances, RCS failed to apply the breakpoint discounts. So that means you're overcharging the client, right? So as a result, improperly calculated advisory fees and thereby overcharge the client. So the question here is, did Olsen exercise reasonable supervision, right? Did he exercise reasonable supervision, right? Did he make reasonable efforts to prevent and detect these violations? Right? Is the compliance system effective? Right? So, I mean, probably we can say, right? Yeah, you fail to apply the discount, this part here, right? So, I mean, probably this shows that the system here is ineffective, right? The policies and procedures here are ineffective, and Olsen should address these inadequacies, right? So now the key question in this case, right, is whether the occurrence of these errors, right? So there's no mention that these errors are intentional. So it could be inadvertent. That means, not intended. All right. So, I mean, it's a question of judgment, right, as to whether these errors, right, these so-called errors, right, are the result of the improper structure and application of these billing policies and procedures. I mean, it's a question of judgment, really, right? So it depends on your. So there's no right or wrong answer, right? So it depends on your arguments. All right. So now let's look at some answers. I mean, 3 students submitted the answers, right? So Tan Hui Yi, Lee Min Yang. Now, who wants the answers to be Agnes Yo also submitted. Agnes Yo, you want your, shall we discuss your answer? Agnes Yo, please respond. All right. All right, I'll look at your question 3. Right, so right, this part good, right? So you get 1 mark here, right? Now, right, so basically here you're reiterating the case without any input. This part here. Right, so your input only starts here, right? However, in some cases, RCS cannot. I think you shouldn't use the word cannot. I think did not, right? There's a difference between did not or cannot. Cannot is that they want to but can't, but they did not. So, so it's actually did not apply the breakpoint discount, right? So you change this, right? Did not. As a result, RCS miscalculated its consulting fees and overcharged the client. All right, so yeah, that's what they did. But then you haven't actually made any conclusion, right? Any analysis here. So here is basically you put it in other words, right? You reiterate the facts in the case. That's all. All right. So I mean, this part you start to score marks, right? This part here, no marks, right? So okay, you understand me? I'm saying, right? Okay, you get marks here. and you get marks here, right? Then this part, Olsen failed to adequately review and investigate the toll outages. What do you mean by toll outages? In a tariff, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you get it. In a tariff schedule and failed to retrieve. Retrieve? What do you mean by retrieve? Fees and charges from the client in accordance with the standard described. Okay. Right. So you just jump to your conclusion without much analysis. Right. Right. Incorrect calculation of consulting fees. Right. So Agnes, you fail to discuss, about whether there is adequate supervision or reasonable supervision. Right. So basically, you just say, yeah, he did something wrong, right? He did something wrong here, and then boom, you go, yeah, he has violated, basically. So he failed to do adequately review, but you need to have a bit more substance, when you say this, before you say this, you need to have a bit more discussion. You understand what